Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to an album we've all been waiting for a very long time. In fact, 9 years we've been waiting for this from guitarist and vocalist of Pink Floyd. I'm talking about the brand new David Gilmour Luck and Strange album. It's his fifth solo album. As I said, first in 9 years, just came out on Friday, September 6th of 2024. We'll break it all down, do a full review and an unboxing here in just a bit. But before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, there's an added bonus if you turn on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on all things going on just like this with a review for the brand new David Gilmour album, Luck and Strange. So as I always like to do, I want to jump back to a little bit of history here. And we're going all the way back to 1967 here when David Gilmour joined Pink Floyd. So 57 years ago that David Gilmour started playing sort of professionally. I'm sure he did some stuff before that, but 57 years, which is pretty amazing. And, you know, he remained with the band all the way up until their initial breakup in 2014, which was following the release of The Endless River. And this album here was built around archival material that they had left over from the Division Bell days. But it was also they could do one last album featuring keyboardist Rick Wright, who had already passed away by this point. So it was a nice cap to the career. It was a nice way to pay tribute to him. And having three of the guys there from Floyd in it made it a great way to cap things off. Now, the reason I point all that out is surprisingly then, and no one was expecting this, the band reformed in 2022 to record the song Hey Hey Rise Up, which was done to bring awareness to the war in Ukraine and to protest Russia's invasion of it and all that same sort of stuff. So we got one more last song from Pink Floyd done, you know, at least in 2022. And they say at that time that it's a one-off, but interesting, since that time, David Gilmour and Nick Mason have not come out to say that it is over. Whereas when they put out The Endless River, they didn't tour, and right around the time that it was either coming out or shortly thereafter, they announced that Pink Floyd was officially done, and then everything was talked about in the past tense. Since this here, there's been no past tense discussion of them. So one has to hope and pray that we get one more album, one more tour from them. But I know that I'm probably just, wishing on that at this point. Thing is that it has been 9 years since Rattle That Lock, the last Gilmour solo album. Endless River, 1 year before that, this was 2015, 2014. So this being the last new album that we got from David Gilmour. And, because it was taking so long, and because we had heard that he was building a song using keyboards from Rick Wright, which ultimately became the song Luck and Strange, secretly hoped it was going to turn into one, but it came out as David Gilmour, Luck and Strange. So that's what we want to talk about. His fifth solo album. It's got 9 tracks on it. Now, if you buy the CD edition of it, you get 2 bonus tracks added onto it. So 11 tracks total on here. The added song, Yes, I Have Ghosts, was a song that was released, I think it was in 2022. So that was done to promote his wife, Polly Sampson's book that she had written, longtime lyricist for Pink Floyd. And then we've got the song Luck and Strange, the original Barn Jam, which is 14 minutes long. So you add all that stuff in there and you get an album that is about an hour in length. But the thing is, the original album being the 9 tracks, and 2 of those songs are instrumentals, and one of them being only 1.5 minutes and the other one being right around 30 seconds. So you take off those 2 minutes there and the 7 songs that you are left with on it, that's really all this album is. It's produced by Charlie Andrew. And initially when I heard that the reason that he was selected by David Gilmour was that he didn't have any problems sort of talking to David Gilmour and telling him when something was good, something was bad. He wasn't, I don't know, have any preconceived notions simply because David Gilmour, being the guitar player from Pink Floyd, he came in and spoke his mind, and that was refreshing to David Gilmour. I was kind of very worried that this would be a very experimental sounding album. And while I do think that there is some chances taken on stuff that's on here. In fact, everything was alleviated when I heard the first single that came out, Piper's Call, on here, which is very classic Gilmour sounding style stuff that's on it. And in all, the first two things that I noticed from the album when I got it, after, they did release 2 songs on this in advance of release, which sort of quelled my concerns that this was going to be maybe a more experimental thing and have less of the Floyd sound. But once I heard the whole thing here, the things that I noticed about this was that, one, this is probably the most consistent sounding album of David Gilmour's solo career. And also, it is a very guitar-centric driven album. And so let me talk about the consistency aspect of this thing. So I think the album itself fits nicely right within the last 2 Floyd albums themselves, Endless River and Division Bell. If you like both of these, you are gonna like this album here. So it's very much in that laid-back style of those 2 albums themselves. And we don't really have Gilmour branching out too much beyond what those sounds are. And so that's nice. We get the roots of what it is that we love about Gilmour, just having him explore it further on this new release here. The other thing about this is that it is very guitar-centric sounding. And what I mean by that is that the things that we know and love about the guitar legend himself, David Gilmour, is that guitar playing. And I've never really felt like his solo albums use that to their advantage. And we get it on, the last few Pink Floyd albums, certainly. But this album here maybe is the most guitar-centric release that he has done, really focusing and letting him jam. Some of the songs on here are 6 and 7 minutes long, and a lot of them have these long, drawn-out guitar playing outros on them for a few minutes in length, which is, quite frankly, what it is that I love about Gilmour, his guitar sound. So we get this album that definitely puts the guitars up front on things, even if they don't come right from the get-go and the songs build, 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 and then end with that guitar sound. It's constantly left in our mind, that guitar sound that we know and love from David Gilmour, which in my opinion is what makes it sound so much like Pink Floyd, and why I throw it back to the last 2 albums that they did, Division Bell and Endless River. Now, the thing vocally with Gilmour is he's 78. And while his vocals are a bit rougher than 9 years ago on Rattle That Lock, and of course, even anything with the Pink Floyd stuff, he sounds really good for what it is that he is singing and what he is doing on this. I think it fits the style of the album. And when these songs start off, they're much more sparse. And that little bit rougher style vocal, I think, works to its benefit at that point. It's not too clean for it. Then as the rest of the instrumentation comes in on a lot of these songs, and they build, they build, they build, until we have those amazing guitar outro pieces at the end. For me, it works. And maybe that in and of itself is that sort of more experimental aspect that Charlie Andrew brought to this, telling him, why do you have to do the typical guitar solo or play it like this or play it like that or put it here or put it there? So I don't know where that stuff really comes out of from it, but I do like the way that this album is structured, and it probably does have a lot to do with somebody coming in saying, you don't have to do just what you did in Floyd, but yet you can still sound like you did in Floyd, just a little bit differently. So let's talk about some of the standout songs on this album. Track number 1, Black Cat. And so this one here is only 1 minute and 32 seconds. This is one of those instrumental tracks typical to any David Gilmour or Pink Floyd release that has the instrumental intro at the beginning. A lot of times, though, they're 3, 4, 5 minutes long. This one here is a very short one at 1 minute, 32 seconds. And the thing is, it's really that good that I want to talk to you about it, that just by the time it is really getting going, it ends. And I'm kind of bummed that they didn't develop this into a full-length instrumental 5-minute, song on here. But I guess true to the words that say, always, leave them wanting more, right? This one definitely leaves me wanting more. So I guess they did the right job on it as a cool little intro piece, where normally I skip a lot of those intros because they're kind of long and drawn out. They don't really go anywhere. This one here doesn't do that. It builds, it builds, it builds, and then kicks into the next song, which is a nice way to kick off the album. And so it takes us right into the next song I want to talk about, track number 2, which is the title track, Luck and Strange. And this is the one that's built around the barn jam, which is where Gilmour would jam with his, or rehearse with his touring band. And so a lot of times he had Rick Wright going out on the road with them. And so Rick is a part of those things. And there's apparently hours and hours and hours of this stuff. And I hope one day we get an entire album or box set of just barn jam sessions, even of stuff like this that has already made its way to albums. Who cares? Put it out. I want to hear it. But this is a great track. And being built around Rick Wright's keyboard playing on here, a lot of the way that they did around Endless River, I think gives it that excitement and lends itself to that sort of what if this had been a Pink Floyd album? What if they had decided to build a whole album around more Rick Wright keyboard stuff? This track here kind of tells you what it would be. But I have to say that out of the entire album, this is one of the lesser songs on it, but I had to talk about it simply because of Rick Wright's involvement on it. Track number 4, A Single Spark. This is one of those songs that starts off kind of as you would expect it to start off, but it builds and it builds and it develops until really interesting part of this thing, in particular Gilmour soloing on this track here. I think it's some of the best on the album. And by the end of this thing, it's screaming Pink Floyd in the way that it sounds. And a lot of these tracks do. They start off and don't initially sound like Pink Floyd. But at the end of every song on this, I'm left thinking, this is Pink Floyd. So even though this has come out under David Gilmour's name, I feel like this totally could fit right in line with the last 2 albums. This song here in particular, totally able to do just that. Track number 6, Between 2 Points. So this one here was actually the second single released off the album, and it was the first one that I felt had much more of a Pink Floyd vibe to it, which is all the little bit more shocking when I found out David Gilmour didn't even write this song on here. And then I was a little disappointed initially when his daughter, who is the one who's singing, but it was not David Gilmour's vocals that we heard on it. So it's his daughter, Romany, who is singing on this thing. And initially I thought, for a David Gilmour solo album, I want David Gilmour. I don't want somebody else. But I thought about it for a while. First of all, it's just a good track. And after I warmed up to it, because it was such a great song, I thought a bit more about it and I realized, what? Even Pink Floyd sometimes had outside singers on tracks. Great Gig in the Sky, Have a Cigar, right? 2 fantastic, well-known tracks by Pink Floyd with outside singers on it. So if you look at it a little more like that the right lead vocal for this was not David Gilmour. The right lead vocal for it was a female vocalist and or even just his daughter, however you want to think about it. That was the right fitting vocal. And now that I look at it a little bit more like that, I've actually warmed up to the song even more, and I can accept it more in the context. But as the album flows, it does not break the album, and I thought for sure it would. Hearing David Gilmour and then all of a sudden hearing a female vocalist and going back to David Gilmour, I thought was going to really break the album, and it surprisingly does not. So it works. They knew what they were doing on this one, and that is one of the reasons why I'm talking to you about it, even though it's already a single out there and you've probably heard the song. All right, and the last song to talk about on here, track 7, Dark and Velvet Nights. This one on here really kind of rocks. It's the most rockin' song on here. Most of the album has a very laid back vibe, which is kind of really what the last couple Pink Floyd albums had about them. They don't really rock all that much. But then again, that's what Floyd is about, that mellow, ethereal, atmospheric feel to it. And you get a lot of that on this album. But this one here kind of rocks the way that the last album, Rattle That Lock, the title track, did for that album. And while that was the first sort of official song kicking off after the intro track, that one didn't work as well for me as the opening track. And I'm glad this one here is not done that way, because for whatever reason, Dark and Velvet Nights works so well where it is placed within the album itself that I love it there. I don't need it to have been any earlier in the album itself. The songs all build and have a lot of power in them that when we get around to this one that kind of rocks right from the get-go, it just works. So I like the song where it is, and I think it has a lot of good flow to what it is creating for the album as a whole in it. All right, so let's take a look at the album itself. This is the cover. Most famous, photographer Anton Corbijn doing this. There's been a lot of talk about it. I gotta say, I don't really think this album cover is any of Anton's greatest works. When I first heard he was shooting the album cover, I thought, okay, kind of cool. But you know what? I don't know. His work is so synonymous with bands like Depeche Mode and U2 that when I see this, my mind goes more towards that as an album cover than as a David Gilmour one. I also don't really care for this, and I don't know whether that is actually David Gilmour up there or someone else. It's probably someone else. It's probably not him at all. But I just don't like that. I think it would have been a far better shot with nobody up there. I would have liked this to be photoshopped out of it and just to have seen the waterfall that is happening there. But all in all, it is an Anton Corbijn shot album cover. There's the backside with David Gilmour looking a little bit, worn there at his 78-year-old age. But hey, what can you expect from an amazing musician like David Gilmour? And we open it up here. It is a cardboard package one. It is not a digipack, at least. We do get the booklet in here. This pulls out. I'll go through that in just a second. We get a couple shots there, of course, of David, and we get him there with his daughter. And then the CD in here, not in any kind of protective sleeve, but, it is what it is. All right. Then we get this. So not the album cover, just the title on it. I do appreciate that, at least when they do that. Another shot there of David Gilmour. Do not like the lettering that they chose for this at all. I do not know who wrote that, but I do not like it. We get the lyrics. It's just stark black and white contrast like the album cover. Nothing overly exciting about any of this stuff that's in there, which is why I chose not to pay for a deluxe edition of this to get a huge book, even if it was more shots by Anton Corbijn, just because I am not wowed by any of that sort of stuff. So all in all, that is the packaging on this thing. Take it for what you want. If you order it off of Amazon, you can get a limited edition alternate album cover. I did not like that one either. I chose to go with the official, the original, and that's what this one is here. But anyway, bottom line, let's wrap this thing up. At 78 years old, this may be the last new music from David Gilmour, mostly due to how long he takes between albums. I'd love to think we would get another album in 2 years' time, but I really don't think that's going to be the case, unfortunately. So if this is going to be the final album for David Gilmour to go out on, because we probably aren't going to get any new Floyd either, this is one heck of an album to be going out on. I really do like this one. It is the closest sounding to Pink Floyd music that I feel, at least the later day era of Floyd, for all of David Gilmour's career as a solo artist. And I didn't touch on this earlier, but David Gilmour has said that he thinks this is his best work since Dark Side of the Moon. And he was very quick to walk that back because he knew how that was going to come off. And anyone's going to simply say you could, never top that. And I agree with that, but I can now understand why he might have been saying that. Because the album itself really is far beyond just solo material David Gilmour. I think this album itself is of the quality, again, at least of the later day era stuff from Floyd. And he really is the person who drove Floyd through those years. And so even though we don't have Rick Wright fully involved in this, and we do not have Nick Mason on this here, if you go back to Momentary Lapse of Reason, Yeah, that was a David Gilmour solo album. Nick Mason did not play on it initially, and Rick Wright did not play on it. So, what is a Pink Floyd album? Really, it's David Gilmour. And this one here, I think, is just that good. And so for me, at least, I feel like I've got another album to add, sort of to the trilogy of albums from Division Bell, Endless River, and now I'm going to be listening to this album with it because for me at least, it just fits that vibe and I love that. And I wish it hadn't taken 9 more years to get something, but at least we've got something this great, this good for David Gilmour to go out on. We're going to pray it's not the last, but if it is, he has done one heck of a job here, and I highly recommend this album to y'all. All right, so there you go. That is my album review for the brand new David Gilmour Luck and Strange album coming from Pink Floyd's guitarist and vocalist, there to the very end at least. Let me know your thoughts on this. Let me know if you feel this thing is one of his most consistent sounding albums and or holds up to the quality of the later day era Floyd material. Maybe you've got an entirely different take on it, which is okay. We are all entitled to our own opinions on this. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.